This data is then compiled into a report. You can see all of our reports on our website, www.pmconline.org. Our hope is to expand to observing family court and guardianship hearings in the next year. In collaboration with Committee of 70, we held a virtual candidate forum for the Attorney General position. As you all know, 2025 is a judicial election year, and we will be organizing appellate court candidate forums. In collaboration with libraries such as Why I'm Missing, Chester, Philadelphia, nonprofits, community organizations such as League of Women Voters, and religious institutions, we have grown our adult educational programs using an expanded list of topics with the aim to increase the public's understanding about the judiciary, the court system, the legal system, and the rule of law. You have on your seat the list of topics on which we organize workshops. Since April, we held 4 programs on the role of the judiciary in elections. Our speakers were United States District Court, Middle District of Pennsylvania, retired Chief Judge, that's a mouthful, John Jones, retired President Judge, Court of Common Pleas of Philadelphia, Ida Fox, who I know is here, so thank you. Retired Supreme Court, Pennsylvania Supreme Court Justice Cynthia Baldwin, retired Commonwealth Court Judge Shelley Friedman, retired President Judge of Blair County Court of Common Pleas Judge Elizabeth Doyle, Mimi McKenzie, and Ben Geffen of the Public Interest Law Center. You notice that there's a lot of retired judges. We didn't want to have any current judges conflicted out since we expected some litigation to arise this past election. The programs were held virtually and in person. We welcome you to join us as an attendee, presenter, or host of our workshops. We also welcome suggestions for topics. 2025 promises to be a busy year, as our focus will be increasing voter engagement for judicial elections through our Navigating the Court System and Judicial Elections. As you know, it is really important that we increase voter understanding and knowledge of the importance of the judiciary. In July, we held a 7-hour Zoom one-day law school for journalists program, which brought over 200 attendees from across the country. Our lunchtime conversation topic was how to cover high-profile trials with a panel comprised of journalists, judges, lawyers, and court administration. Again, that flyer is on your seat as well. The purpose of that yearly program, or this yearly program, is to assist journalists and the media in their coverage of the courts. As we are all aware, the business of media no longer allows journalists and reporters to focus solely on the courts, but instead, they often pop in and get sound bites with limited preparation time. They also have to read a few hundred-page decisions, digest them, and summarize them into a maximum of 100 words, which are then assessed by their click worthiness. I was sitting next to Judge Rendell at an event who told me that she actually has helped reporters understand her decisions because she wants to make sure that they get it right. Our hope is to assist the journalists, reporters, and media with this task in order to provide accurate and reliable information. We repackaged the sessions as a citizens law school, placed them on our YouTube channel, and air them on public access television. And we successfully concluded our initial year of our expanded PMC Civics in the Classroom programming. We presented in 8 inner city schools to 250 students with the assistance of 24 attorneys and judges. In every school we partner with, we offer 4 core classes: the 3 branches of government, the importance of the independent judicial system to our democracy, how courts operate, the judicial system, how does someone become a judge, and the jury system. In addition to these 4, each school has the opportunity to select 4 supplemental programs. One of our programs arose from a student asking me if I knew what RICO is. I looked at this student. I used to be a civil litigator. I used to bring RICO cases. And I said, how do you know what RICO is? And he's like, young thug was just arrested on RICO charges. And I said, okay, who's Young Thug? So I went home that day and I looked it up and I saw that Young Thug was indeed arrested on RICO charges in Georgia. Georgia is one of the few states that has a RICO statute. We now have a lesson, actually 2 lessons, thanks to Daniela, around that indictment and trial. We actually show the students the words of the song. We then present it with the evidence that we have from the trial. We ask them if it's enough for a grand jury indictment versus a regular jury decision. We also talk about First Amendment. It is an amazing class. Sometimes the kids get a little rowdy, but it really energizes them. So the students brought it to us and we seized the opportunity. So I'm also saying this because I want you to join us. There's a lot of lawyers and judges in this room. It is such a rewarding experience. We have lesson plans, syllabus, activities to assist you. I'm going to share with you now a video from our program.
I can't say enough about this program. I am such an overawed volunteer, and it has been so thrilling this past year to work with these kids, to work with Daniela and Debbie. Those lesson plans were so spot on. They were so extraordinary. They were so of the moment that I can't even tell you. They were just, every month it would be just a wonderful topic. This is the gold standard. It is just extraordinary. Thank you so much.
I was overly impressed with these middle schoolers because they were always engaged. They always wanted to get their input in. And there were times when we would ask people to raise their hands and we would have 3 things to do and have 8 hands up. And I mean, it was that way every class. So, I mean, their engagement was just out of this world. And I was just so impressed with how well they did and how well they did with the information.
I would say my favorite part was arguing, like my side. Winning, of course, like I wanted to win. I knew we was gonna win from the start. And I really like this program because I feel like I didn't have this in like middle school or even in high school now. So I'm really grateful to have this program like in our schools now and stuff like that.
Just seeing students that weren't even interested in law be so interested in wanting to see how it turns out and see how they could change the way the ruling went. Having them so engaged, I can only imagine students who actually want to be engaged in law, engaged.
We have future lawyers, judges, and leaders of this city and this country in the schools that we're teaching.
So it's really, I can't emphasize enough, it's rewarding. If you want to help us, please send me an email, give us a call, send an email through our website. We also continue to advocate for judicial reforms. We organized and led an informational hearing on jury service. In 2025, we will be working on legislation to improve jury service, including increasing the fees paid in state court, as well as addressing the mental health of jurors and felony disenfranchisement. We are currently collaborating with Committee of 70 and the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania to embark on a jury service education and awareness initiative. PMC is also working on a speaker series for next year around this topic. We have a very robust and ambitious program tonight, so please turn your cell phone ringers off. At the end of the program, you will hear about our virtual silent auction trips, which are being provided through a partnership with AM Fund. As you saw when you walked in, the trips are for 2 to South Africa, Greece, France's wine country, Norway, Croatia, San Francisco, and Switzerland. There are no restrictions, believe it or not. There are really no restrictions. You have 3 years to travel and you stay in 4-star hotels. Okay, the order of the evening is is going to be as follows. We have a video from the governor to acknowledge our honoree. We will be followed by Bob Heim, Chair Emeritus of PMC's board, to introduce his friend Ben Picker. And then Sarah Gitchell, our co-chair of the board, will introduce our keynote speaker, Ali Velshi, with whom I will be having a fireside chat. And we look forward to your participation with questions. So we have the governor's video.
Thank you, Debbie, for that introduction, for your friendship, and for your commitment to serving the good people of Pennsylvania. You know, under Debbie's leadership, Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts continues to build on the same honorable mission that they've had since this organization began nearly 4 decades ago, to uphold the integrity in our courts and to fight for equal access to justice. PMC is doing critical work with our communities to advocate for a more fair and just system for all Pennsylvanians. And I know they're only able to do this work because of all of you here tonight and because of leaders like tonight's honoree, Ben Picker. I am pleased to join you all in celebrating my friend Ben Picker, who has worked tirelessly throughout his career at Stradley Ronan and as a founding member of this important organization. I've seen Ben's skills as a mediator and arbitrator up close, and I've always been impressed by his thoughtful, deliberate, calm approach to solving problems. Ben is guided by a passion for justice, for equity, and fairness in everything he does. That's why, in addition to all of his personal accomplishments, Ben is also looking out for the next generation of leaders and has focused a great deal on his work promoting diversity in the mediation and arbitration fields. We are grateful for leaders like Ben serving in our communities. We need more people like you in our courtrooms and throughout our justice system. And though I could think of a lot of places where we need to dispatch you around this country and the world right now, I'm grateful that the city of Philadelphia and our Commonwealth has you serving us here. So thank you, and I hope you all have a great evening.
Before I begin, let me ask you to acknowledge 2 really forces of nature. One that you just heard, Debbie Gross, who is incredible as the chair of executive director of PMC. And the other is her predecessor, one of her predecessors, longtime chair and wonderful advocate for the goals of PMC, Lynn Marks. Lynn, stand up for a minute. Come on. Yeah. So when Debbie asked me to present this award to Ben, I had 2 reactions. One is, how am I supposed to do it in 5 minutes or less? Which Debbie, Debbie, she's a pretty strict taskmaster. And she said, that's what you have, 5 minutes or less. And the other one was, where do I begin? Where do I begin? I first met Ben in 1983, and I think the little story I'm going to tell will tell you a lot about Ben. He was running to be the vice chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar Association, and he called me and he said, Bob, I don't really know you, but you're at the Deckard firm. Would you talk me up in terms of the election? And I said, well, Ben, you seem like a nice guy, but I've already committed to your opponent, and I really can't help you. And Ben said, and I remember this very well, Ben said, that's okay. I really would like to get to know you. Why don't we have lunch after the election's over? And I said, I'd like that. We had lunch, and we talked for a long time at lunch. And I think, in the closing lines of the movie Casablanca, it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. So when Ben became chancellor in 1986, he had a number of priorities. One of his first priorities, and I remember all of this well, was he wanted to encourage lawyers to do more pro bono work. Ben was a champion of Philadelphia VIP, and he thought that we could all do better if we spent a little bit of our time, not representing clients every day, long hours, and doing some work for people who really needed it. So as a champion of VIP, he was out there talking about it all the time. He also, as the governor mentioned, told this profession of ours that we needed to do better with diversity, that Philadelphia lawyers should be representative of our city, our country. We needed more diversity in the profession. And then, as you might expect, he talked about the very sad state. And I don't know how many of you can go back all the way to 1986, but he talked about the very sad state of the judiciary and the need to move away from judicial elections and to move to a merit appointment system. And this was not new for Ben. He had been talking about moving away from judicial elections and moving to an appointment system even before I think he ran for chancellor. So this was a concern of mine as well, and it was a concern of the Committee of 70. And there was the chair of the Committee of the 70 at the time was Fred Voigt. Now, some of you who have some gray hair like mine, or some of you who have no hair at all, may remember Fred Voigt. Fred was a lovable curmudgeon, and he was a devotee of getting rid of judicial elections. And the three of us got together and we talked about the need for having a statewide organization, something other than the bar associations that just didn't seem to move forward with this in any meaningful way. And we said, maybe we should come up with our own organization. And Fred and Ben and I talked about it, and we said, well, let's do it. Let's start our own organization. And we modeled it after an organization in New York that was called the Fund for Modern Courts, and we decided to call it Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. And that was the very beginning of PMC, and of course, PMC, with Ben's help and the help of a lot of you that are in this room, has done great work since then. Debbie pointed out to all the work that we've done in the community. We haven't gotten there yet with replacing judicial elections. There was a judge whose name was Arthur Vandenberg, who once said that the battle for replacing elections with a merit appointment system is not for the short-winded. And boy, was he ever right. So we have been fighting this battle all of these years, and we will continue to fight this battle until we win this battle. It is something that needs to happen. Now, Ben has been a leader in the legal profession. As Chancellor of the Bar, he has hit all the right chords. And since then, he has continued to hit all the right chords in moving away from what Ben thought was a mistaken reliance exclusively on litigation to solve problems that companies and individuals had. And Ben became, I don't know how many years ago now, Ben, how many? A lot, many years ago, became a champion of a form of alternative dispute resolution known as mediation. And I think all of you know what he has done. And I mean, if you think of national mediators, you know, and your mind goes to, well, who are the mediators nationally who are very prominent, very well done? People have done hundreds of mediations, not just a few, not occasional. If you were talking about Philadelphia, you might say, well, how about Judge Greenspan? Well, she certainly has a reputation here. But nationally, across every kind of case, all across the universe of mediation, Ben has been an acknowledged superstar. a superstar of mediation. His book on mediation, I don't know how many of you have it on your bookshelf. I have it on mine, but his book on mediation, the second edition, just won the ABA award for the best book of the year. I mean, that is an incredible accomplishment. So Ben, and lest I forget, I mean, talk about putting mediation in a kind of global context. There is an organization, the International Mediation Institute. And when I learned about this, I thought, this is crazy. But the International Mediation Institute has a representative to the United Nations. And guess who it is? Ben Picker. So that's, you know, pretty heavy stuff. So Ben has many admirers. I think those of us in the room, but well beyond those of us in the room. Probably his biggest fan is his wife, Terry, who was right here sitting in the front row. But we're all big fans of Ben. And it is a great honor and pleasure for me to present this award to my dear good friend, Ben Picker. Come on up. Can you get up? All right, well, I have to now give you the award. So. There you go. All right, so we'll take this away from you now.
Have your notes, don't take mine.
No, I won't. Okay.
Bob, thank you for those warm and gracious remarks. And to the governor, I hadn't seen this. It was the first time. And so I want to thank the governor, most importantly. That was for Debbie Willig. I have to recognize. I have to thank the governor. His remarks were very touching, but most importantly, his support for Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts and merit selection is very strong, and we appreciate that support. So thank you. I want to begin with a little story. When I was just a fledgling lawyer, I was assigned by the court to represent a prisoner incarcerated at Eastern State Penitentiary. When the prisoner, let's call him John Smith, was only 18, he stole 7 watches from a jewelry store. I'm going to call on you. His sentence, 3 to 5 years on each watch. The sentence is to run consecutively. When I visited John Smith, I think we have the district attorney here. I think he would agree that's a harsh sentence. He had served 18 years, which is more than I think the average homicide. I got a thumbs up. So when I visited him in the prison, he prepared me for the arguments I would have to make in what's called a post-conviction hearing. And I really prepared for this because we were all in the 70s, and hopefully many of us still are, about correcting injustices. And the first thing I said when I got to court is what every lawyer says every time. May it please the court. That's all I got to say. The judge interrupted me and he said, Mr. Picker, if you can find Mr. Smith a decent job, I will release him immediately. That judge was the Honorable Edmund B. Spaeth, Jr. He deserves applause. Not only a president judge of the Superior Court of Pennsylvania, among other things, but a longtime chair, first chair and a longtime chair of the board of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. Many of us here know him, knew him, and affectionately we called him Ned. Ned was the very definition of intelligence, fairness, and compassion. And no judge, I repeat, no judge had a greater sense, greater passion for judicial independence. So, Bob, it's a particularly meaningful honor to receive from PMC this award because it's named for Ned Spaeth. Thank you. When Bob Heim, Fred Voigt, and I established PMC, our singular mission was to achieve constitutional reform for merit selection of appellate judges. Then, as now, we were one of a very small number of states in the nation to elect all of its judges on a partisan political basis. Our goals: to promote candidates for the bench who were vetted in a rigorous screening process, to eliminate conflicts and appearances of impropriety from attorneys who raise funds for judicial candidates and then end up appearing before them in court, and to promote stronger and better diversity on the courts, on the appellate bench. There's a list of many more benefits, but I will stop with that and go to PMC's website and you'll learn more. In place of partisan elections, we proposed a bipartisan statewide commission of women and men, lawyers and non-lawyers, persons from all walks of life, who would screen candidates and make recommendations to the governor for appointment. We believe then, and we believe now, that the judiciary needs to be insulated from political pressures in order to maintain public confidence in fair, unbiased decisions. Well, I know what you're thinking. Here we are, it's decades later. We haven't achieved this change. Bob, it's Justice Vanderbilt. You stole my thunder there. The revered Justice Vanderbilt, who was the Chief Justice of the New Jersey Supreme Court, who said, quote, "Fight for merit selection is not a sport for the short-winded. It deserves repeating." So in this fight, Bob and I and hundreds of others have all had to learn how to become long-distance runners. And we are not out of breath. Today, I'm pleased to report some good news. For the first time in decades, thanks in part to Bob, we are having productive discussions with those in opposition about moving away from elections. So everyone stay tuned. Over the years, PMC has expanded our mission. I was going to say a few things, but in the interest of time and because I think our president covered them all, I'll pass on that, but just go to our website and you'll see even more some of these exciting programs. I was particularly excited by the one-day school for journalists that had us with a couple hundred, I think, I don't know where Debbie is, from around the state attending. Our successes could not have been achieved without exceptional leadership over the years from our friend Ned Spaeth, Judge Phyllis Beck, and our presidents. You did it again, Bob. Lynn, where are you? Lynn Marks. You don't have to stand a second time, but Lynn was a champion for so many years and took us from our initial embryonic stage to a place where we can be very proud that we got to in large measure because of your efforts in Harrisburg specifically. Also Maida Malone, who I do not think is here, and Debbie Gross, who I know is here because she spoke, and she will stand again in a minute to speak with our distinguished guests. I've left one person for last. I want to thank my co-founder, longtime PMC board chair, and special friend, Bob Hine, whose sustained vision, strategic insights, and unwavering commitment have been nothing short of heroic. I couldn't say it any other way. Once again, I'm deeply appreciative of this recognition. Thank you. And now, David.
Thank you, Ben. Great. Hi, I'm Sarah Gitchell, co-chair of PMC, and I'm here to introduce our keynote speaker, Ali Velshi, who is an award-winning journalist, host of Velshi and chief correspondent for MSNBC, as well as host for the Velshi Banned Book Club on MSNBC and an excellent podcast called Velshi Banned Book Club Podcast. He's written or co-written several books, including his latest, Small Acts of Courage, A Legacy of Endurance and the Fight for Democracy, which I highly recommend. In it, one gets a sense of what has drawn Ali to his career in journalism. As he says in the book, if a tree falls in the woods and there isn't a reporter to record the moment, how will the world know that it fell? This also aligns with Malka Older's Improving Coverage and Democracy editorial in yesterday's Philadelphia Inquirer, where she stresses the importance of bearing witness, and not just in election times, but at all times, if we are really going to support democracy. But even more important than his role as a journalist, what comes through in Ali's latest book is something that we can all participate in, and that's our role as citizens. Ali tells the story of his family's search, going back generations and across continents, for both the right to be citizens and the ability to belong to the society in which they live. As Ali says about citizenship, first and foremost, it's a legal status that allows, and I would say obliges, you to participate in the civic life of a nation. Second, but equally important, it is also the sense of belonging, a kinship with your fellow countrymen. And it is buried in those two concepts, the rights and obligations, together with the sense of belonging, where we can all pitch in and play a part. We're very excited to have Ali join us for this evening for our Q&A session with Debbie to share his wisdom and inspire us to do what we can, where we can, and when we can. Thank you, Ali and Debbie.
Thank you for that. Can I just say I just love what you said there, Ben, because it's relevant to the moment that we're in. Nothing partisan about this. We're all long distance runners now, and we're not out of breath. And it's something to remember. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So I just finished reading Ali's book, which as Sarah said, I highly recommend. It's called Small Acts of Courage. And your fulsome family history truly provides a lens or window into how you view the world, our democracy, and even our most recent elections. So for the benefit of the audience, and I know you just completed a grueling book tour, so I apologize, but can you just provide us with a flavor of the summary of your family's experiences from Chotila, India to Toronto, Canada?
Yeah, so thank you. And thank you for having me here. It's a real honor. And Larry, nice to see you. And somebody next to Larry is my old boss, Eden, many years my boss at CNN. So thank you. And it's great to see so many familiar faces tonight. My family left India in 1893. And for anybody who knows any Indian immigrants anywhere, that was the Indian diaspora was born in the second half of the 19th century. It's a conversation for another time. But India, when the British took over, was about 22% of global GDP. It was one of the most important, most prosperous countries in the world. When the British left in 1948, it was 2% of GDP. And in that slow erosion over British colonialism, there just wasn't enough food. There were droughts. There was a vibrant nation had been turned into a nation that existed for the financial benefit of the colonizer. And as a result, when things like droughts occurred, and there were dozens of them in the 1800s, there was just nothing to do. There's nothing you do about it. You literally had to leave. And by the way, it's the same reasons people migrate today when the land stops being fruitful. So my family were among those. They'd been very prosperous business people, and they were reduced to deeply indebted migrants by the 1890s. So they went to where you went. And if you're Indian, you went where the boats went and where you were allowed to go. And that, if you were in the east coast of India, you went to other parts of Asia. And if you were on the west coast, you went to Africa. And so my family ended up in South Africa. And they were, chugging along like every other immigrant in the world, trying to put food on the table and send a little bit back and make sure they could bring the whole family over. And in time, for reasons that I describe in the book, they got deeply entwined in the anti-colonial, anti-racist efforts in South Africa. I'm tempted to say anti-apartheid, but apartheid wasn't really a thing until 1947. It was just colonial racism at a level that was even unusual for Africa and other colonies. And so they got involved in this fight, and they stayed in that fight, and they lived in that fight, and they died in that fight. But the quest for democracy never ended. And after it looked like they had met with certain failure in South Africa, and if you read the book, you can't imagine that there's anything left, any juice to squeeze out of that lemon the search for democracy. They left for Kenya, which was also a colonial country, but they were there when the British flag came down and the independent Kenyan flag went up. And they so craved democracy and multiculturalism and all these things. And Kenya ultimately didn't live up to that promise, in large part because in the late 50s, early 60s, there was a wave of anti-immigrant, anti-Asian sentiment going through Africa for some valid reasons that I also describe in the book. So finally, my parents ended up in Canada, where they jumped in with both feet. They so wanted democracy, they so wanted citizenship, they so wanted civic engagement, they so wanted fairness and liberty and equity that they jumped in with both feet. And of course, that's my modern history. I was fully influenced by a family who ate, slept, and drank politics all the time. Most of the rest of my family, I'm the only one in my family who didn't get involved in politics directly. So I'm the black sheep. But the soundtrack to growing up in a political family is the news, and that's what drew me into it. And I'll say the interesting part about this, Debbie, is I probably didn't know most of this until very late into my career, when I realized what the influencing factors are. Because like everybody else, you hear your family stories and legends, but they're in the background and they're old people in sepia photographs who never smile. Like, you have no sense of what they influence. But what I have learned now is that I am a sort of a continuous chain in this struggle for democracy and fairness and equality and liberty, and that my children and my grandchildren will be too. That's just the way it goes. The fight doesn't end. It's a long race. And that the lesson is you can't be out of breath.
But I love this story because you campaigned with your dad when he ran for his first election.
Right.
And I'm going to just put in there that my dad was a representative in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. And I distinctly remember campaigning with him, and you went door to door, and so you tell a great story about how your father's first election.
Yep.
And how he didn't win.
Yeah.
And Ali was devastated.
Yeah,
but
it was 11.
his father wasn't.
Yeah, no, I was 11 years old, and it was election day, and we were out there doing what you do on election day. This was Toronto in 1981, by the way. And there was nobody around my father who thought he should have run for office. They all thought it was ridiculous. A little 5'2" little brown man, who his name is Murad Velshi. I wish it were Mike. He might have gotten a few more votes. But anyway, he runs. It's election night. He wants to go home, change, freshen up. So at about 6:30, I mean, by 6 or 6:30 back in those days, rush hour was finished in Toronto. We went back home, changed. We were on the way out to the campaign office right about 8 o'clock when the polls closed. Now, we're thinking it's election night. It's going to be a while. So we're in the car, just the two of us. He's driving. I'm 11. We turn on the radio, and the broadcaster comes on, and he said, "The polls have closed across Ontario. It's too early to determine who will form the government tonight, except in this one constituency in which my dad was running." And they were able to declare the incumbent reelected. 800.30. We were 30 seconds into the results, and we had suffered the most resounding loss in all of Ontario. So I look at my dad, and I said, "I can't believe we lost." And he looks at me and he said, "Of course we lost. We were never going to win." And I said, "What do you mean we were never going to win? Why did we do this?" And he said, "We did it because we could. We did it because I could represent my ideas to the voters, and more of them voted for the other guy than voted for me. And that was actually how it was always going to turn out. And tomorrow," remember, this is a family who grew up under apartheid, who could not vote because of the color of their skin. He said, "And tomorrow life goes on. Nobody gets arrested." And we get to the campaign office, and everybody's cheering and crying. It's like, "What are you people cheering about? We lost." And subsequently he won years later. But I don't even remember election night when he won. It's not relevant to me. What I remember is the night he lost, and the lessons I learned from politics and about civic engagement. He had completed a journey the day he lost, before he ever broke any ceilings and won anything. The day he lost, he had completed a journey that my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather had set out to achieve freedom and liberty and equality and participation as a citizen. And that is the lesson that has informed me.
And so now I know that there are a lot of mixed emotions about the elections we just had, but based on your appreciation and your dad's appreciation, your family's appreciation of our right to vote
Yep.
and of democracy, what suggestions do you have?
Well, I've sort of three in particular. The first one is to remember that when you're mad about politics or you're angry at politicians, and there are lots of reasons to be, and there are a lot of politicians who give you reason to be angry about it, most people are involved in politics for the right reasons. And my father's campaign and his election and the people who helped him were involved in politics for the right reasons. And one of the things I remind people is that to not be involved in politics, to eschew politics, to not want to engage is not a right that you have. It is not the right that the people who died in this country to give you the right to vote gave you. It's not the right your ancestors gave you, and we all have ancestors that came from somewhere else for a better life here and a freer life here. But it is also the privilege of people who have never lived a day in their life without politics. Go one day without politics. Go 1 week without politics. It might be relaxing for a bit, but then you will realize that you can't do things like you're doing tonight. You can't be here to fight a long game to change something and make something better. And it will get better because you're fighting for it. And the third thing is that it doesn't end. It's not over. Partisan or not, everybody knows where I stand on things. You can Google it. It's fine. The point is, we continue to have agency, right? We still have agency. There are people I report on around the world who do not have agency. They do not have a vote. They do not have the right to participate in the way that their government will go. We do have that. Didn't go the way some people wanted it to go, but we continue to have agency. So things like tonight are, first of all, you're all the same people you were 2 weeks ago, but organizations like this are more important because civic engagement happens here or with people who fight book bans. In fact, you can't fight everything that society's doing. You can't boil the ocean, but you can do something in your neighborhood. You can do something in your city, and you can do something in your state. And we can have those kinds of direct impacts. So more so than before, if you are frustrated by anything that has happened, double down in what it is you are doing. If you need a break from cable news, I totally get it. I do. My bosses don't want to give me one, but I could use one. I get it. It doesn't have to be about being mad at somebody. It doesn't have to be at all about taking in every piece of information. It does have to be about sticking to what you believed was important to change and just doing it incrementally. I write about people, including my grandfather, whom I never met. He died at the age of 58 in 1961 in South Africa at the height of apartheid. He was Gandhi's youngest student. 1907, he joined Gandhi's ashram. He was 7 years old. From 7, he was a fighter for freedom and justice. He fully died thinking his efforts had failed. He had no idea that his granddaughter would be a candidate for office, that his daughter-in-law would be a candidate for office, that his son would be a candidate for office, that his son would become the first South Asian Muslim elected anywhere on this continent, or that I was his grandson. He died thinking the whole thing was a waste. That may happen. Your life may come and go, but the changes that you are trying to make now will live long after you, and people will remember your name, and they will thank you for the work that you did. So the work doesn't end.
Thank you. So for years, I took the 3rd grade class at Penn Charter to observe a naturalization ceremony. Spoken at naturalization ceremonies as Chancellor of the Philly Bar, and next month I will be taking a class from Ad Prima Charter School in Mount Airy to observe a naturalization ceremony. You are you recently naturalized citizen.
Yep.
Why'd you decide to join the United States, and what advice would you give to these students who, I want to say, take for granted
Yep.
their American citizenship?
Well, first of all, I did too, which is why I didn't even want to bother. It's like I so don't care that I don't even care to fill out the paperwork to become an American citizen. I'm a Canadian. It's pretty easy to be a Canadian in America. Some weeks it's even better. But I just didn't care. And there was another Canadian who worked at CNN with me at the time, Ashley Banfield. She was a host, and I was standing in her office one day, and we were just joking around. She said, "Why haven't you become a citizen?" My wife and kids are citizens. I said, "Why haven't you become a citizen?" I said, "Well, because I'd have to do jury duty." And she said, we have a different court system in Canada. Like your chances of being called for jury duty in Canada are pretty low. But she looked at me and she said, "Okay, so you're willing to take all the benefits of living in this society and not fulfill any of the obligations." And I said, well, I was just kidding. I just like kind of threw that out as a comment. It was kind of supposed to be funny. But it hit me. It's like, it's not really about the jury duty. That wasn't really actually my concern. It's a lot of paperwork to become an American citizen, and that didn't really get me anywhere. And you don't save on taxes or pay more taxes. It's kind of just the same. But the point is, there are obligations to citizenship. And when you take on that citizenship, these problems all become your problems. And I wasn't really looking to take on your people's problems. If you're a Canadian, it's like, it's way more fun to be America's hat than to be in it. But the point is, I live here. I work here. I'm a journalist here. I'm a critic of America, as every good citizen should be. They should be a critic and a lover of their nation. And so I did it for that reason. And 2 months ago on Constitution Day, which by the way is the same as Citizenship Day, right? They're the same day. I presided over a naturalization ceremony at the Constitution Center. And the same thing happened to me as the day I went to get my citizenship. I looked around a room like this, and I realized I'm kind of bored, but this person might be their freedom. This might be somebody who's coming to finally marry their loved one. This might be someone's, escape from brutality or a regime. This is not a joke. This is very, very serious stuff, and you need to own it. Now, part of it is I did it in a courthouse, federal courthouse, so you can't take your phone in with you. And it took a long time. Like it was hours and hours. And so they gave me a Constitution, and I read the Constitution because there was nothing else to do 3 times. And I was like, well, you know what? I've never associated this document with these people because this looks a little messy the way you're all running things. But there's a neat setup to your country. And if pursued properly, this could actually end up really well. So I really think that we need to decide that citizenship is not simply a right you get. It is a series of obligations, and you need to leave this place better than you found it. And that's why it must be taken seriously by those of us who are naturalized and by those of us who were born into this. It's the same obligation and it's the same set of rights, despite what some people in an election will tell you.
Thank you. So I think it was last week on your show, you discussed the many countries, nations, and regimes which were led by women. And notably absent from that list is the United States.
Yeah.
Why do you think the United States has not had a female leader of its government?
It's a good question, and I'm not smart enough to know the answer. We've got all sorts of opinions, and I'm sure everybody's got one on this. But it is weird. And I just wanted to make the point in that, because I really read a lot of names of a lot of countries.
Yes.
A lot of names. And that's, I mean, you could cut it off because
It
you can
went
go into
back for a long
prehistory, you can go to,
time.
right, you can go to ancient Egypt. I mean, women have been running countries for a long time. And good countries and bad countries, and some of the women have been really good, and some of the women have been really bad, and some of them have been arrested and deposed, and there have been revolutions. I mean, it's all kinds of women. So the idea that a woman has to exist at a higher standard to be elected is a weirdly American thing, because other people are totally fine with putting women into the mix, and they can be good, bad, or indifferent. Everybody, like this is just such a weird thing that America can't get its head around. And it might be a particular case where you just didn't like this candidate and you preferred that candidate. That's fair, but we've really given it a lot of shots. Even in America, there are a lot of women who threw their hat in the ring many, many years ago, and I ran the video and the audio of Shirley Chisholm and others. People just laughed. I mean, you just laughed out loud. It was kind of they were in on the joke. We just need to figure this out. This is wrong. And other countries, in the subsequent discussion, what we learned is that for some reason in America, and it's got, if all of obviously you're a bunch of lawyers, so all know about affirmative action stuff. But in this country, we have come to associate things that sound like quotas or affirmative action with people who are less qualified getting jobs. And of course, that's only accelerated in the last few years. But other countries actually just figure out ways in which you need to get underrepresented groups involved so that leads to better choices down the road. And we need a reframing around that in America, because women are underrepresented despite being half of the university graduates more, but despite being more than half of the workforce, they're just underrepresented in senior leadership positions, including in government. And I just think it's time we accept that there's something weird about the way we do this in America and fix it.
So the only thing I want to say is that finally Pennsylvania has recognized, in the judiciary at least, And we have a president judge of our Supreme Court, a president judge of our Superior Court, a president judge of our Commonwealth Court, president judge of our Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia, the head of the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, and I'm sure I'm missing a few, who are all women,
Right.
which is remarkable. So this is something that we should all, I mean, it took
That's right.
300 plus years, but we are there at least in our judiciary. So
Yeah.
we just need to have maybe now.
That's important because that's actually a big part of civil society, right?
Right.
But things that actually feel like governance and rules and the way you govern things. So that's not a small matter. We just have to figure it's a mindset problem with voters that we're going to have to work on changing.
So you were shot by a rubber bullet as you were covering a peaceful march after the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis. And you subsequently learned that there was actually a concerted effort to target journalists.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about freedom of the press?
Oh, deeply concerned. And I'm not concerned for me. I'm concerned for you. I'm concerned for everybody in this country because what is happening now, and I had a great conversation this weekend with Maria Ressa from the Philippines, who's a Nobel Prize winner, whose media outlet held Rodrigo Duterte to account the entire time he was president of the Philippines. And she said, this is the Philippinization of America. And it's an interesting comparison because the Philippines is modeled on America. Its constitution, its judiciary, its system of government is modeled on America because it was a Spanish colony and then it was sort of an American entity. The problem is it's not just the overt things that people say they're going to do about the media. It's the stuff that wears you down. It's things like audits in her case or weird trumped up charges. And by the way, it's not the Philippines. They do it everywhere. India does it. Turkey does it. Hungary does it. Egypt does it. Lots of countries do this. Weakening the freedom of the press, which is not, I'm trying to remember which amendment that is. Oh, it's the first one in the Constitution. I mean, the founding fathers took freedom of speech, real freedom of speech, not the way we interpret it now about the ability to just say whatever you want on Twitter. That's not what this is. But they took this concept really very seriously. And it is how we hold power to account, right? There's only two things that I do in my job that are important. We bear witness. We go and show you things that you can't see because you work or you can't be traveling or you can't tell that it's happening. We show things to you, and then we hold power to account. That's it. Everything else is gravy. If you restrict our ability to do that, whether you like the news or you don't like the news, if you restrict our ability to do that, you will only lose in the end because a democracy depends, in addition to a judiciary and a legislature, it depends on an informed electorate, a critically minded electorate. And you are doing great work in trying to inform people about the courts and try to inform journalists about how they cover the courts and the legal system. But to your point, what about in school? What about the civics lessons? You know, we used to complain that people weren't learning coding because they were dissecting pigs. So then we started coding. Then we got a COVID and nobody knew what a enzyme and a virus was versus a bacteria. But now we have to think about, do we need civics more than we need coding? I don't know. I don't know how to solve the way we educate people, but something's wrong and it's global. We are becoming critical thinkers less and less than we ever were, in part because of the media and compartmentalized media and self-curated media. But this is a bad thing. Because what you have is exactly what the Constitution was designed to prevent, and that is waves of sentiment being overtaken by mobs and real deliberation being overtaken by sentiment and emotion. We've got that now, and we need to move back from that. And a press doing its job is what's going to help us. Now, there's another argument for another day about whether the press is doing its job the way it should be. Two different things. Preserving the right of the press to do that job is the most important thing. Then talking to your press and talking with your wallets and your feet about what they should be doing, separate discussion.
So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about your book banning podcast because it's really remarkable. And I want you to just tell, I don't know how many people here have listened to it, but and you've really made a difference. And so could you share with us,
Sure.
A little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, 3 years ago, there were about 2,500 books banned in the country. When I say books banned, I mean, it could be in an independent county. Bucks was fairly involved in book banning. York County was fairly involved in book banning, but mostly it's Florida, Texas, Oklahoma. then the next school year, which was 2 school years ago, it went from about 2,500 to almost 4,000. The last school year, not the one we're in, the last school year was 10,000 titles were banned. So I don't know if I'm doing anything because just more books keep getting banned. But 2 things about book banning. If you look at the history of banning books, and the first book banned, the first mass published book to ever banned was, in fact, the first mass published book, the Bible. William Tyndale's translation of the Bible into English, because the church in England was like, whoa, you can't be having people read the Bible. That's nuts. They'll make their own decisions about things. So that was the first book ever banned, but books have been banned forever. Nobody ever got better for it. No society ever got better for banning books. Obviously, we think about Kristallnacht and we think about Germany, and that was the worst thing that ever happened, right? So nobody ever got better. But when I first did my Banned Book Club, the first day I aired it, my father texted me and he said, I didn't know there were public libraries until after I left South Africa. Because that's how you keep people down, right? You make them not read. You make them not be critical thinkers. You make them not learn things for themselves. Books are both windows and mirrors. Right? They let you see yourself and they let you see a world that you didn't know existed. You can't be letting people see worlds that don't exist because maybe they want that. So here's the best part about book banning. One day I suspect you and I are going to be talking and I'm going to be thanking the book banners for bringing people into politics, because they got people out to vote for school boards who didn't vote for school boards before. You've seen it right here in Pennsylvania where they turned a school board around because they were book banning, and you can change it. You yourselves can go. I mean, I tell people, make sure you got a library card. Remember the free library of Philadelphia? That's a big deal. It's free. It's an American concept, by the way, free libraries. Right? It's actually, you can go there and get a book for free. So when you ban books, you don't ban them from me because I can get any book I want. You ban them from the kids. You ban them from people who don't have enough money to be able to, but kids' books are super expensive. So most of the book banning is for kids. Remember, librarians all have master's degrees. Teachers should be curating your students. I'm a full parental rights guy. For all these people who ban books because they say a parent should have the right to determine what their kids are reading, absolutely cool. But no parent has a right to determine what my kids are reading. That's my choice. And as librarians all over the country tell me, that librarians are fantastic people, but in public libraries, they do work for the government. Do not give the state the right to determine what you and your family will consume. So it's a simple matter. That's right. And it's not an argument for all the things you do or don't like in books. It's not an argument for every book, because there are a lot of books out there that aren't particularly that good, but do not let the state determine what you read.
So I couldn't help, but I went to the Art Museum's craft show on Thursday night, and there was a woman there who was making bracelets of banned books.
Yep.
So I got this for
That
you.
is amazing. I would treasure that. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I would love to take some questions from the audience. I know he has to leave. So
This is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. This is great. We're all believers. The thing that excited me the most was the video you showed with the kids who were at those sessions and had that enthusiasm.
That's exactly right.
And you hit on something that I was going to ask even before you said it. 54 years ago, when I was a senior in high school, I had to take a civics course.
Yeah.
My dad was a scientist. I was a math, physics whiz. I thought, what am I taking this for? I loved it.
Yeah.
I actually got involved in politics. What is this group doing to get civics a mandatory thing to learn about in schools?
So it's funny you ask. There is a statute in Pennsylvania that does require civics. There's just no teeth to it. So there is a group in Pennsylvania, Committee of 70. I see Lauren here and Justin, and we and other groups have gotten together to form PA Civics. So we are working to try to get some more teeth to that. The National Constitution Center is part of it. There is a small but slow and steady increase. But part of it is not just civics, but it's also engagement. It's also jury duty. It's just understanding what our principles are in this country.
And by the way, it's one of the few things that we can achieve in a bipartisan fashion in this country. Like, it'd be hard to convince anybody to be against civics education at this point. So it's a good area. I'm on the board of the National Constitution Center. We've got a great curriculum. We've decided to target 8th graders because that seems to be a good place. And we're developing, we teach teachers across this country, and they are so amazingly engaged. And you end up with kids like the ones you saw in the video who just didn't know what they didn't know, right? And now they know it and they want in.
Any other questions for Ali? Sam. Hold on. She's coming.
Okay, MSNBC, NPR, Al Jazeera, CNN. I obviously have trouble keeping a
Yeah,
job.
exactly. Yeah.
So, do they hire people that are going to have their voice, or do they push you to have a certain agenda?
It's a really good question. Thank you. And that's a question that's going to help us all understand a little bit more about what's going on. We have a distinction in the media between people who are news reporters and those who have a perspective, call it opinion. And there are a lot of people who think opinion is what's been the death of television. I disagree with that largely because everybody's got opinions. Opinion's not the death of television or of journalism. Lying is kind of the death of journalism, right? Lack of reliability. So what in major news organizations, generally speaking, the standard to which you are held is honesty, fair reporting, meaning did you ask someone else? It doesn't mean you hold two opinions. Or that you give two opinions equal weight, but did you give someone a chance to answer for themselves? Did you invite them as a guest to answer for themselves once you've accused them of doing something or you're holding them to account? But what we've done is we blurred the lines a little bit recently where it's not clear to a viewer necessarily where the news reporting ended and where the opinion started. So I am an opinion journalist, but I have many, many years of training as a reporter, and I still go out as a reporter. So if I'm out there in the field reporting on a story, I'm reporting on it the way you would expect a reporter to report on it. To the second and more important part of your question, the places I've worked at have not told me what to say about anything at any point. And I generally have an understanding with them that if that were to change, I would probably just leave. That's not universal. There are places where the message comes from on high, and your success depends on your ability to execute on that message. Not how I choose to do it. Again, I don't like it. I will say, though, we should remember that opinions are opinions, and if you know where they're coming from and you know how to evaluate them and you're a critical thinker, having opinions out there is not the problem. The problem we've got in journalism is the lack of standard in some cases that is applied. The fact that people who you think are journalists and who should be giving you the news are not necessarily, and they might be lying to you. But Eden and I, for many years, I mean, we would agitate over scripts, about 3 words in a script to say, is this fair? Is this honest? And we would change things to get there. Less of that happens in some cases today, but my employers have never told me what I can and can't say.
Okay. Oh, Deb. And then that'll be our last question because I know Ali has to get a train.
So Ali, your colleagues, Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough went to Mar-a-Lago today in part to, quote, reset communications. What do you think that means if MSNBC is not telling them what to say, what to think?
So I will tell you that for sure. That part is for sure, that because the people have been asking me about this all day. I have not talked to Mika and Joe about this. I only know what they said on TV. But I will tell you this, they didn't go there on anybody's instruction. I don't know how the bosses feel about them going or not going. They might like it. They might think it's terrible. I don't know, but they didn't do that. And so that part, whatever they did on their own. And they put forward an argument that that said, you know, they hadn't spoken to Donald Trump, but for, I think Joe called him after that assassination attempt, the first one. But they hadn't spoken in 7 years or something of that nature. And they felt that they were due for a reset. One of the things about MSNBC is that we don't all do it the same way. Don't even share views on things, but we respect each other's, rights and beliefs to do whatever they do. And so I'm not getting any invitations to Mar-a-Lago and not going in, but I'm prepared to see how this unfolds. I don't know, and I'm sure they've thought it through, what you get for doing that and how that works. I will say this, as long as we are all agreed that, again, our jobs are to bear witness, tell people things that we have the resources to tell them that they can't do on their own, and then to hold power to account. So I'm hoping that they're thinking they can do a better job of holding Donald Trump to account if they've got some sort of a relationship with him, which they've not had for 7 years. I have very different relationship with Donald Trump. We've interviewed several times. He celebrated my getting shot. He talks about it a lot, brings it up at rallies. We're not going to be chums anytime soon, but you know what? If somebody else wants to be chums with him, if they can get their job done, if that helps them, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
All right. Well, thank you so very much.
Thank you all.